So, welcome everyone. This session is focused on CISSP upcoming changes in the curriculum, which are going to be effective from 1st of May. And most of the reference for my this presentation, it has come up from Clement book, and Clement has done a very great job. He's the owner of CC Cure, and definitely he needs he deserves this credit actually. So I must say most of the reference is coming from his book. But yes, I also did some kind of internet research, going through those topics, and also mixed up my own experience with these slides. Okay, so that is how we are coming up with these changes. Let's let's cover a small summary of the changes which are going to be effective from first. So when it comes to domain one, that is the security and risk management, we have only one change, and that change is compliance check. Okay, so yesterday we covered in there, like, we have to get compliant with multiple regulations. It may be a local regulation of that particular country, or sometimes it may be a global regulation, right? For example, GDPR. For example, if you are there in California, then you have to abide by California privacy rule. If you are there in Canada, you have to get compliant with PIPEDA, right? PIPEDA is one of the privacy regulation for Canada. So that way, we have to see for the local regulations and also the global regulations as well. Okay, it's not only regulations, uh, it also about some industry standard. Okay, for example, if you are in a company who is dealing with credit card payment, you need to get compliant with PCI DSS, right? If you are into healthcare department, then you need to get compliant with HIPAA. So based on all these kind of different standards or industry standards also, we have to think of all the security control whatever we deploy. So when we deploy security control, how do we deploy this security control? So first and foremost, you will understand your own requirement, your own company requirement. You will carry out a risk assessment onto your company, right? Now this risk assessment will also be covering your internal risk, that is the risk associated with people, with technology and process. And it will also cover risk which is external to your organization. In most of the cases, you don't have control on any external risk, but then you have to think on the controls which can actually lower that risk for you. Okay, so based on that, you will identify your requirement, and then while connecting these kind of requirement, again you have to think in that we have to get compliant with all these regulations and all these standards as well. So that is where you will go back to a particular framework which you are referring. Maybe for example, you are implementing ISO 27001, then you will go and pick up ISO 27001 controls and implement it as per your requirement. So you have scoping done when you are clear about your requirement, and then you pick up those controls from that particular framework and then customize those as per your company requirement. So the customization process is what we call it as tailoring. Okay, so you need to implement controls to make sure that you are compliant with all these legal regulations, all regulatory requirements and all these standard requirements. Okay, and then on an ongoing basis, you need to carry out some kind of risk assessment, you need to carry out some kind of audits, so that you are able to understand if there is a gap in this compliance. Because when it comes to compliance, it is either 0% or 100%. There is nothing like 50%, 40% or 60%. So if you are not compliant, you may have to pay fines. So that is where the compliance checks are very, very important aspect when it comes to cyber security. Okay, so that is what we covered yesterday. Then in domain 2, I don't see any major changes out there. So that is where we directly are coming on to domain number 3. Domain number 3 is about security architecture and engineering. So the focus of this domain is to focus on um, designing something in a very secure fashion. when you are designing, when you are architecturing, when you are engineering that particular product, that time you have to take security in consideration. Okay. And not only security, because it's not only security nowadays, there are so many privacy rules which are coming up. So you also have to think from privacy perspective also. So with that perspective, there are some topics which are recently added to CISSP thing. One of the topic is related to cryptographic attack. So in total, there are 13 attacks which are kind of covered in your CBK, right? Out of those, we have covered most of them, but there are some new attacks which are there in the new syllabus. One is the pass the hash. So pass the hash um, is an attack wherein an attacker is able to steal some hash values hash values of your password, and then use it as it is on some other source into the environment. Like for example, somebody is able to steal your session keys and then use it at somewhere else to actually hijack your attack, or to hijack your session, or maybe some other server. Okay, so that is what we call it as pass the hash. Just take the hash and pass it to the next system. Then we have timing attack. So this timing attack is nothing. It is a part of your side channel attack. We know side channel attacks are the attacks wherein we are not intrusive in terms of attacking, but what the attacker does instead is he is going to monitor a particular crypto system when it is in action. So he is able to actually monitor what is the variation in terms of power consumption when the encryption or any cryptographic function is happening. So that is one thing. He also have a view on how much time it is taking for encryption to happen, because sorry, the time taken to encrypt different character may be different, and out of that, if we monitor that, then the attacker can gain some kind of can drive some kind of intelligence out of it to break a particular crypto system, right? And third type of attack is power, based on power, right? uh, System consume, for example, there is more load when encrypting a particular character, then power consumption will be little more. So there is variation in power as well. So those are kind of things which are used by the attackers to actually infer the intelligence, or they find out some kind of trend, and then they try to break a particular crypto. So in that sense, when it comes to only time, monitoring time for each and every character to get encrypted and then driving a trend out of it, this is what is timing attack. Then Kerberos exploitation. We have covered Kerberos so much in depth, right? And that is a de facto standard nowadays. You go to any enterprise nowadays, if they are using Windows machines, they might already be using Active Directory. And if they are using Active Directory, obviously they are using Kerberos in there. So Kerberos is an authentication protocol. We know how Kerberos work, right? There is a subject, that means your client. Then there is a KDC, which has your authentication server, which has a special component which is called as TGT, ticket granting service. Okay, and then as and when you need to use any of the service in Kerberos, you have to go back to your authentication server every time and get authenticated from there, and then you can use the service. So I'm not going to cover that so much into depth, but the point here is uh, Kerberos also is susceptible to some of the attacks. So one of the attack which is there is kind of pass the hash attack, and then using a pass the hash attack, that means stealing some kind of session key. Because in Kerberos, what happens when you go in the morning to your office, you actually log in from your laptop, and once you get log in through your laptop, that means you are getting authenticated from your Active Directory. And once you get authenticated, that particular session stays there for a good amount of time, maybe 4 hours, 8 hours, as per the administrator configuration. Now, if during this time an attacker is able to gain uh, information about your session key, then that particular attacker can try to imitate as you in the environment. So he will at least have a ticket to survive into the environment. So those kind of things happens actually in Kerberos a lot. So that is where there is a specific focus on Kerberos exploitation during this session, right? And we have covered that in detail yesterday. Then ransomware. This was not covered in great depth in the previous version of CISSP. Now, since we are able to see a very good increase in terms of ransomware attacks, so it is worth covering it up. So ransomware attacks are the malwares which comes to your system, and then they encrypt your data, all the data which is there on your hard drive. They will encrypt it by using a public key, and then to decrypt that particular data, they will ask you for some kind of ransom, right? To give you that private key, they will ask for some kind of ransom, and that is how they are actually operating in that fashion. Ransomware can come through phishing email. It can come through your employee browsing some websites which are kind of malicious. Then somebody can download some kind of malicious code, and then it can happen. In some cases, we have also seen that ransomware also comes through if your system admin is using a remote desktop protocol, which is kind of not a secured one. So that is also sometimes one of the source for ransomware to come and hit you. And ransomware is growing too much into complexity. The attacks are getting much more complex nowadays, and every organization is supposed to have a specific policy against ransomware, wherein you have to declare to your employees that we are not uh, paying any ransom, and you will get that confidence not to pay that ransom where when you have the appropriate controls installed. So the biggest control I would say will be the security awareness. Then you can have like educate people so that they are not they are able to identify any kind of phishing emails out there, right? Because that is their primary source for ransomware to come and hit you. Okay, so that's one. Then next thing is you need to implement right controls, maybe email gateway filtering, IDS, IPS, all those parameter defense you need to have intact. Okay, and then you also need to have detection mechanism so that you have a central sim solution, and if there is a command and control communication, if there is a lateral movement happening somewhere, then you are able to pick that up, right? So that's the key to success fully counter ransomware. But even after that, these kind of attacks are growing so much in complexity, sometimes it is even difficult. So in that case, it is always better that you have multiple copies of your backup, because if nothing works, at least you can cover up. You can restore your data to some point, and always keep multiple copies of backups, because sometimes even backup get infected. Okay, so that is the key to come out of a particular ransomware. Then we have spoken about digital right management. So digital right management is a security technique wherein uh, we are able to control a particular data which is disseminated to somebody. It may be some kind of data, it can be some kind of email, it can be some kind of software, it can be some kind of uh, audio file, video file, whatever it is. But then the vendor, because the vendor has done a lot of hard work to come out with that creative thing. It may be his intellectual property, he want to protect it. So how do we protect it? That is where we are coming out with some kind of solution which is called as DRM. And this DRM has grown so much, it has flourished in the past, you can say past decade, because with the advent of cloud, uh, it is getting much more prevalent nowadays. So we use that heavily. When we use DRM solution in terms of your enterprise perspective, we use information right management. So generally we install a central server, we integrate it with your Exchange server, integrate it with your Active Directory, and that is how we are able to enforce the information management on to these sources. Right? So that's the kind of thing we need to understand here, guys. We have already covered that, but I'm just giving you a quick glimpse of that. Then, guys, yesterday we also spoken about high performance computing. This is a technology wherein we're just not relying on to one particular CPU and making it high performing. Instead of that, we have a network of computers which can actually work in parallel, and which can work in some kind of you can say cohesion way. They can work in a cohesion way to give you much more processing. And that is how the supercomputers even work. So the industries like your weather forecasting, uh, all those scientific NASA and all these agencies, right? They go for supercomputers which are capable of high performance. And whenever we talk about performance, it's not only your CPU, it is also about your memory. Because if your memory is slow and your CPU is fast, no use. We are going with the speed of the lower, which one is the lower speed. So that way we have also have to think over how you have to design your network, which is very fast, and you have to also think about your storage. So combination of all those things gives you something which is called as high performance computing. Then we have spoken yesterday about privacy by design. So this is where the intent is that as and when we are designing a particular software, we keep privacy principles in picture. What data you are collecting, how you are taking a consent from the end user, how you are open to the end user by having a privacy policy or something like that. Then what is the purpose uh, being communicated to the end user? Is that clear to the end user, right? And once you collect that information from the end user, maybe you are collecting his address detail, his name, his company, and email ID, and all those kind of things, right? You have to make sure that their information is always kept secure with you. It is always accurate. Integrity is there, accuracy is there. And then you are having implementation of safeguards to safeguard that particular information, right? So you have to think in, whenever you are designing any kind of system, you have to think in that all those kind of security controls and privacy controls are kind of taken care of, right? And yesterday we have discussed that in detail. Then a new concept which is coming up nowadays, it's not out yet, I would say. This is going to change the entire definition of computing by itself. Okay, so whatever the computing definition we do now, it is all based on zeros and ones. Okay, and that's the way the computing world actually works, isn't it? But then with cloud, with this quantum computing coming up, the entire scenario is going to change. We are not going to work on zeros and ones. The entire architecture will be changing, right? But this particular technology is not yet available in the market. I would say it is under trial. It is not widely available as of now. But yes, this kind of technology is going to enhance the computing to a greater extent in the near future. So those kind of things we have covered yesterday, guys. Then we went to network and communication security, wherein we covered in some topics. Now, CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. This topic we have covered into our training as well, but again, this was emphasized, so I thought I am going to cover that again, and that is what we covered yesterday. Okay,
Uh,
so CASB,
Manoj sir, can you go back to the last slide? I need to take a picture of that.
sir, can you please wait? Let me finish
Yeah,
this up, and then I will take a pause.
sure, sure.
Okay. Okay, so Cloud Access Security Broker is a particular solution which is available uh, in form of a particular software. So as and when you are accessing some cloud services, that is where this software will come as a mediator out there. So all the requests which are going from your side to the cloud, or whatever data exchange happening from cloud to you, is going under some kind of validation process through a CASB solution. It may include your encryption, it may include your DLP solutions, it may include your access control. Kind of, it gives you fine grained control between your end user and the cloud. So that is another solution which is available. We discussed that yesterday. Then we also have 4G, 5G cellular network. I think this thing is already covered in our previously also. I gave you entire walkthrough how we have emerged from the days of 1G technologies to now 5G technology. Okay, so 5G is the buzzword nowadays. It is going to be implemented shortly, and very new technology is coming as part of this entire 5G family as of now. Then Zigbee is another technology we have covered yesterday. What is Zigbee? So Zigbee is a technology which is specifically designed for IoTs, for those IoTs which consume very less power, which are always not active on network side. They are most of the time they are idle, and then if there is a command from them, then they will wake up, kind of thing. So why do we do that? Because we have to make sure that these kind of equipment, they have a good battery life as well. So the communication is not based on Wi-Fi. This particular communication is not based on Bluetooth. There is a specific technology which is Zigbee, and that is how we are able to come out of the limitation of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to actually go ahead with that. So that is what we covered yesterday, Zigbee. Then next technology we covered yesterday is Li-Fi. So with the 5G coming up, this new topic is going to spur up a lot. Enterprises are getting ready for this particular technology. What is the difference in Wi-Fi and Li-Fi? In Wi-Fi, we use radio communications, whereas in Li-Fi, we are going to use light as the communication medium. So we know light cannot pass through a wall. So obviously, somebody standing outside of my enterprise will not be able to kind of have any access to my network. So that's a great thing. Okay, and that is how light, is the fastest mechanism to transfer data and all. It is expected that we are going to have speed around 240 or 250 Gbps, 250 Gbps once Li-Fi is in action. So this is going to complement 5G in coming days. Now, then the next technology is edge computing. So edge computing is a different perspective altogether. We are using a lot of uh, IoTs in our home, right? We may have smart watches, we may have a smart TV, we may have not many other smart things, just like Alexa and Siri and all that, correct? So whenever you talk to Alexa, is that request going to US, to a central server to the US? If that is the case, then thousands and lakhs of people, they're purchasing Alexa, and all the time they are using it, and the network will be flooded all the time. Okay, that's not a great idea to have it. So the idea is to localize the response from server. And how we are going to do that? We may have to spend some more money setting up those servers locally to your area, or maybe those edge devices are also having some kind of cache wherein they can respond back to you if some kind of request is repeated, and then only those requests goes out which are unique. So that way we are able to control traffic onto the internet. That is the concept of edge computing. Then next, we have also discussed about VXLAN, that is the extended VLAN, basically. So VLAN is what we know, any virtual LAN. How do we make it? We configure that into your L2 switch. Two people sitting here in Bangalore, two people of your team sitting in Delhi, you can configure their system to act as locally. So just they will feel like he is just sitting next to me, because they are all in the same IP range, so they can access the same resources. That is what VLAN. Okay, now when you need to send a request from one VLAN to another VLAN, then you need inter VLAN routing, and for that there is a 12-bit header which is used with the routing purposes. Now with 12-bit header you can only use 4094 somewhere, those VLANs. You cannot get more than that. And obviously in data center, with so many virtual machines, maybe a single hardware may have hundreds of virtual machines out there. And in data center, it's a very common scenario, right? Data center is where, which is the hub of all these devices out there, right? So maybe having a limitation of 4094 is a bit problem, right? So that is where we need some kind of solution which can further extend this. So that is where the idea of VXLAN has come up. So we are able to break in the limitation of 4094. Now we can use 16 million kind of different segmentation, network segmentation all around. And then we are able to communicate in a very, very effective way. So that is what is the by default technology when it comes to data centers all the time. So these are the kind of topics which we covered yesterday in network and communication security. Then, guys, identity and access management, we are going to cover today a few of the topics like just in time access. I will give you some basic scenario where it fits in. Okay. So, for example, you have, uh, you came out with a cloud solution, right? And you have a very technical, you are a technical team which provides a lot of solutions to your customers. And then everybody in your team may require global access, and like on cloud, maybe on Azure, on AWS, somebody having a global access or global administrator role is a big problem, right? Because he can do each and everything on the system, right? But what to do then? It is always recommended that you should have not more than 3 to 5 global administrators. But in case if there are more, then how you are going to cover that up? So the solution to such a use case can be implementation of just-in-time access. Now, what is just-in-time access? You make other people also administrators, right? But the thing is, as and when they need administrative access, they need to actually go and activate their access first. And while they are going to activate their access, they will be asked a question: for how long you want this? Why you want this? So the person who is going to escalate himself as an administrator has to give a proper justification, and then it goes through a approval process, maybe a manual approval process you can set up, or maybe automated way it can be kind of approved, and then that guy can work as a global admin for a specific period of time. So the moment he logs off or his time is over, then he will become as a normal user again. So that is what is just in time access. That's a beautiful concept which has come in, because obviously all these privileged access we need to control all the time. Next one is risk-based access control, wherein we are going to talk about risk, we are going to talk about access control, and we have specific slides for that. So I need not to explain much here, but the focus here is when you do authentication, when you do authorization, this entire what you call as mediation process, it has to be based on risk. Few resources may not be that valuable for you, but few resources may be very much valuable for you. Then how you're going to control that? So that is what we are going to talk about. Then trust but verify. So this is something like you need to trust your neighbor, but do not trust them as and when they come out with some kind of fact. In the background, always validate. So we are going to talk about how this works in the computing world. Then we are also going to talk about a very good concept which is very prominent nowadays, that is the zero trust model. What is zero trust model? How does it work? It simply says verify each and everything, verify each and every request. Don't just believe on some kind of inbuilt trust which is already there for you and you are not authenticating things, right? That is what is the zero trust. Then comes domain number 6, which is security assessment and testing. In this particular domain, we are going to talk about some new topics. One is breach and attack simulation. So this is a new word which has coined up, uh, came from Gartner recently, and that is where companies are forming their inbuilt team nowadays to do all that, and we are going to cover that also today. Then next one is ethical disclosure. So vulnerabilities comes all the time. We hear about vulnerabilities, right? And sometimes how do we actually go and disclose those kind of vulnerabilities? We will talk about those things a lot here. So that is what are the changes from domain 1 to domain 6. And then coming on to domain number 7, that is security operations. So in this particular domain, we will talk a little bit about artifacts. Artifacts is nothing but facts, uh, which proves you something, right? It is very handy when we go and investigate few things along with your evidences, right? It helps you a lot to actually prove a particular fact. Then we have Locard's exchange principle, which says that the any kind of attacker is definitely leaving some kind of trace for you to investigate further. Then privilege escalation attack. So this is very common nowadays. Privilege getting escalated by malwares and this and that. How we are going to deal with that? So there is a small discussion we have about this topic. Then we are going to obviously talk about SOAR. It was very much expected to come as a change in CISSP because now SIM, we know what is SIM, right? Security, incident, and event monitoring. That is the heart of security monitoring in any company, right? Now the thing is, this SIM sometimes we need to integrate separately with so many other solutions, and it may not be super efficient. All right, then the idea here is to bring in more automation, to bring in more orchestration into your SIM, so that it is able to do some of the action by itself. It identifies a particular incident and then respond to it. Simple, right? To some extent, at least. So that is what is the sole solution we are going to talk about. Then we are also going to talk about threat intelligence, because threat intelligence is a big piece nowadays. Every company must have some kind of threat intel. uh, you may have it in a manual approach, your team going through all those website, us cert, this and that, and then trying to collect information related to latest threats. Or it can also be automated, it can also be based on open source, it can also be subscribed from a third party. There are companies which are giving this solution nowadays. So we are going to talk about that a little bit. And then user identity and behavior analytics, and is, I tell you guys, it's so helpful. It is going to like change the way uh, we are able to identify any kind of internal threat. Okay, so it is basically a solution which is for the internal threat. And believe me, 80% of the attack, it doesn't come from hackers. It doesn't come from outside. They actually come from your insider, from your employees, from your contractors, from your vendors. Right? So how we are going to monitor their behavior is what is the crux of this particular topic. Then we will end up this discussion with some changes onto the software development security. And that is where we are going to cover a lot about software defined security. We are going to talk about microservices, the way it is changing the world nowadays. You can see all big applications. You talk about Amazon, you talk about eBay, you talk about any new applications, right? Most of these are based on microservices, and there's a lot of uh, advantages of using a microservice architecture. We'll talk about that also a little bit, and then we will talk about serverless computing. Right, this name may be a little misleading for you, because serverless means no server, obviously. How come processing happen without a server, right? It is not possible. So this, that is why I say this term is little misleading. But what is the perspective behind this, we are going to talk about in our discussion today. Then we will also talk about function as a service. Now guys, function as a service, we have come to that level wherein a particular function, if you need to execute, no need to have it locally. You can just go to that particular cloud service, give a call, and you will have that functionality done with all and every features inbuilt into it, all security always inbuilt into it. So that is again something which we are going to cover today. And then finally we will end up the discussion for today on um, something called as maturity model. So we have already spoken about CMMI maturity, we have spoken about software CMI maturity, but this particular model SAMM model is coming from OWASP, and we are going to touch upon that a little bit. So, guys, these are the kind of changes which has come up. These you can say some new topics which has come up as part of your CISSP syllabus, and we are going to cover that. Okay, so I think that's a good summary of entire changes which are going to happen from 1st of